Hello, this is Angela with Progress Permaculture. Welcome back to Hausfrau Friday. It is a really nice, if a little bit humid, Friday evening here in Portland, Oregon. I just got back from meeting with folks from the Neighborhood Association from a couple of neighborhoods over. A really great opportunity to meet some folks in the Russell neighborhood and see a little bit of their community and learn about what is going on there. And I appreciate them coming and letting me speak with them. So now that I'm home, it's after dinner, I wanted to take a few minutes and film a video that I meant to film much earlier in the day, but things got away from me. Hausfrau Friday is a segment that I try to do every week where I talk about the ways that sustainable living and homemaking overlap. And I don't confine it to just specifically homemakers who do this profession full time, but to anybody that has a home and a household to care for, whether you have a house full of kids or you have your own place all to yourself, or it's just you and your partner, or you and a collective of friends that are living together. We all have homes that we need to care for, and we all have interests in things that are meaningful to us, sustain us as people, and are not tied to a paycheck. So today is a little bit different. I posted on some of my different social media platforms and said, hey, let's do an AMA. What questions do y'all have for me specifically around homemaking? We can talk about the gardening things later in a different video. I should probably do an AMA for permaculture and gardening stuff. I was not expecting as many questions as I got, so I have way too many to cover in this video, but I have put all of them on the list on my phone of future video topics, or maybe I'll do a follow-up AMA in a couple of weeks to cover some of the other questions that I can't get to today. So thank you very much to my patrons. I will prioritize your questions. To folks who aren't my patrons but ask questions, I really value your input and your interest, and I have not forgotten about you. I do want to honor the folks who have supported me through Patreon and kind of bump them to the top of the list, but I will try to get to all of the questions in time. So while I am chatting with y'all and answering questions, I'm going to be working on a vest that I am making. You can see this is the ribbed waistband of the vest. This is some Malabrigo, which is 100% wool that I got 50% off in a colorway that is going to match two of my winter skirts that I wear all the time. I'm always freezing, so I'm always looking for ways to layer on more wool and stay warm in the winter. And it was such a good deal at half off that I justified it. It meant that making a sweater was going to be about $30, which is quite a splurge for me, but I did it. So yeah. Let me knock out some of these questions here. Put my laptop down here. So Stacy asks, I'd like to know how you process and preserve all of the food coming out of your garden. I see a lot of YouTube homesteaders using expensive equipment like freeze dryers. Oh, that is way, way outside my budget. I am very envious of folks who can justify a freeze dryer, and I think I would make great use of them because I really like freeze-dried food, particularly fruit. Not in my budget. So how do I preserve my food? I do a lot of canning. I do a lot of pickling. The number of folks in my household who love pickles is 3 out of 6. So I find that I eat a lot of the pickled stuff, and so do my eldest and my third kid. I would make more pickles. That's a great way to utilize produce out of the garden if I had more family members who loved them. I do a lot of canning for fruit. I do a lot of things like jams and jellies, and then canning fruit. I do a lot of freezing. And so we're not off grid. I am not trying to preserve food without electricity. So when you blanch and shock in ice water and then freeze, or you just freeze whole, it really preserves a lot of the nutrition in a way that canning doesn't, especially for vegetables. You can kind of can the life out of vegetables and they lose a lot of nutrition, and freezing is actually really good. And so for us, when we were saving up for ways to, kind of make our household a little bit more sustainable, prioritizing buying a freezer was really high on the list. So typically this time of year in the garden, my freezer is about half full of produce. So I've started putting in things like mulberries and raspberries and, blueberries and Juneberries. And I have some of the tail end of last year's shredded squash and roasted frozen squash, and roasted frozen tomato sauce and things like that. And it slowly transitions over. There's this turnover where I'm trying to use up the last of the frozen things from last year. I actually have a video about how I organize my freezer. I have a solar dehydrator that I use to dehydrate things like figs and other fruits and vegetables that I want to get really crisp and dry. We have a lot of sun and very little rain late in the summer, so it's really ideal for using a solar dehydrator. Stacey also asked about organization of things once you preserve them. I end up putting preserved things under my breakfast nook table. I end up putting whole squashes under my bed. We don't have a very big house and I don't have as much space. I would love to have like a larder or a pantry, and I don't have as much space to organize preserved food as I would like. So things tend to get tucked in, and also like pickles and things tend to just accumulate in jars on the counter as they're fermenting. Faith asks, as a homemaker, how do you manage your time effectively without succumbing to the hustle mentality? I do succumb to it fairly regularly, and I feel like for me, part of homemaking is actively pushing against the temptation to just hustle, 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 and be really busy. In an ideal world, homemaking would allow me to have time and space to pursue interests and to pursue a slower pace of life. The reality is that I have to do homemaking in the context of the real world, where things are really fast-paced and hectic, and people expect a high level of turnover and efficiency, and where there's more to do than there is time to do it. And so for me, I don't have a great answer to that. Faith, I feel like it's a constant tension for me between trying to do all of the things that a homemaker can be obligated to do, and then trying to cultivate the lifestyle that I find so important, because I only get this one life, and I'm trying to create a good childhood for my kids and a good quality of life for myself. So if you have thoughts about how to avoid that, I would love to hear about it. So Rox asked me, I know you like to preserve things. I know you make jams. Are these primarily frozen, or do you water bath can? I water bath can all of them. I don't do the fill the jar hot and then just flip it over for 5 minutes. That's when I first started canning. That's what other people taught me how to do. I'm really a stickler for using USDA canning procedure. So depending on the size of the jar and the type of thing I'm canning, I either get hot water bath canned for 5 or 10 minutes, which is why I do a lot of my jams and jellies in the fall. I tend to prep the materials that I'm going to make jam out of. Like I'm making apricot jam. I will do the lime zest and the lime juice, and then I will chop all of the apricots in 8-cup increments, and I will write on the outside of the Ziploc bag the directions for making jam, and I'll throw it in the freezer. And then in the fall, when it's cool or chilly in the evening, that tends to be when I make a lot of my jam. I don't like to run a water bath canner in the house in the summer when it's already hot. And so being able to kind of stage the jam production has been really good for me and made it much more doable. Okay, Tea Garden Chicken asks, as an older single person, how do you not get overwhelmed with the money, energy, time being short? What are some tips for prioritizing what really needs to get done? And especially if you don't have extended family support. That's an excellent question. I don't know that I have a great answer on that. For me, the way my brain works is just lots of lists that are constantly run. In fact, I was talking with my friend Jessica at the park the other day, and she had mentioned this, like women in particular don't have time to actually like let go of the running lists in their head. And so when you have downtime, a huge amount of your brain space is still dedicated to keeping everything going. And so for me, I just kind of hold and manage most things mentally, which is exhausting. And I find that when I have things that don't get done, it's just because I run out of time in the day, or my mental capacity is so used up and my brain space is so filled up that I drop balls. And so I know that a lot of people utilize lists and charts. My mother was really big into a calendar that she wrote everything down on, and then Post-it notes that she left around the house that helped her prioritize what needed to get done. And she was always moving Post-it notes around so that there were things that she's like, actually, this has to go on the back burner. I don't have time for it. So she would physically move things from the urgent list to the this can wait till later list. And that's how she prioritized things. I think that it's important when we're trying to figure out what to let go of. For me, number one thing I let go of is having a super tidy house that is company ready. That's the number one thing I'll let go of. My own nature is to want to be extremely controlled and extremely tidy. And that just doesn't work in my life. And so for me, that's the first thing that drops off the list. And I have to be okay with that. And I have to let go of my own pride and my own ego if somebody comes by and the house looks like a bomb went off, because I'll say, well, I spent my time doing other things that were more important to my family, or things that were more necessary. Some of the ways that people get organized for their homemaking is, for me personally, just another item in my day that I don't want to sit down and do. I don't want to fill out a detailed planner. I don't like to make written lists. I like to just keep it in my head and jot notes on my phone. Had I been a homemaker in my mom's era, I think the Post-it note thing probably would have worked out pretty well for me too. Sarah asked about aronia berries, what I do with them, and I am going to have a video coming out on that later this year. I meant to do one last year on what I do with all of my aronia berries, and I just ran out of time to finish filming it, so I will do that this year. So Sarah, hang tight, wait until later at the end of summer. So tagging on to what Tea Garden Chicken said, Becca asked, what about if you have a commute, and how do you prioritize what can get done in household systems to help you be efficient if you have to spend so much time in the car getting to and from work? Great question. For me, I found that the pandemic was such a slower pace of life because I wasn't driving kids to things, and I got so much more done. And also all of my hobbies like roller derby stopped dead. And so I had so much more time to experience what life would be like in a reality where I didn't drive anymore and I didn't have to spend time in the car. And I had so much more free time to play games with my kids and to just sit and have long conversations with them, to go on long walks. And find now, over the last couple of years, I spent a lot of time driving my dad to appointments and several times a week, and then going to visit my dad several times a week. And so much more time was spent in the car. And I found it harder to get things done around the house. So Becca, I totally am hearing what you're saying. As my kids have gotten older, they're now 12, 15, 18, and 20. I find that they are able to contribute more, and I'm getting a little bit more of a balance. For example, the meeting that I went to this evening, my 12-year-old vacuumed the living room while I was gone. And so I find that I have folks who have more autonomy and more capability as they get older and are being more responsible with contributing to the household that they live in. So I know that's not an option for everybody, but they do make more of the mess. I just find they are now cleaning up more of their share of it instead of all of it falling on my shoulders. I'll also say that my spouse is a really good partner in trying to help as much as he can with household chores so that I can do other things. For example, he did the dishes tonight so that I didn't have to. Chris asked, when I'm starting to learn a new skill for the first time, how do I go about learning that skill? YouTube, peers, something else? It's a great question, because I am really self-taught in a lot of things. I love to read books, and for a long time we didn't have internet and I didn't have a cell phone, and I utilized my library like crazy. I got a home educator's library card so that I could check out everything for my kids and everything that I wanted so that I could build my skills and my knowledge base to be a better homeschool parent. And I just read everything. I tend to have a topic that I'm interested in, and I go on the library website and I just search and I order everything on that topic and I bring it home and I read it. As I've gotten older and I don't have as much time to sit down, I tend to do everything on audiobooks. So I do a lot of nonfiction audiobooks, a lot of podcasts. I don't watch as much YouTube as you might think as someone who's a YouTube creator. In fact, I have a long queue of videos, especially for fellow content creators around permaculture and gardening, that I just don't necessarily have time to sit and watch all their videos, and I try and carve out time to do that because I think there's so much good educational content on YouTube. I would say books are the number one thing. And then the number two thing would be I like to go and take classes and go to community groups and interact with other people and learn one-on-one from them, or in a group setting, an in-person setting. Before the pandemic, that was really important to me. Me learning about other people's lived experience and gleaning little bits from other people, either through books or YouTube or in person, I think can be as important as reading journal articles and scientific research papers, which I also really like to do. So Chris, I don't know if that answers your question. I'm also not afraid to be ignorant of something and to tell people I have no freaking clue, please teach me. And I think that is something that I have learned over the years and was harder for me earlier, is to kind of let go of that pride and be free to say I have no idea, I need somebody to help teach me. I actually don't have the ability to speak on this subject or to carry out the task I want to carry out because I don't know enough yet. So being able to admit that you're a beginner and a person who is lacking in the knowledge that you want to acquire is a great first step in getting to where you want to go. And I know so many people who know so much about so many things and are really willing and eager to share what they know. That's one of the best things I think about social media. There are lots of horrible, toxic things about social media, and I have contributed to the chaos there plenty of times and not always been my best self in those spaces. But there are so many people who want to share and maybe live in a rural setting, maybe live really far away and don't have the ability to connect in person, don't have the wherewithal to write a book or a magazine article, but they'll connect with you over social media and share their experiences and give you tips and strategies. And so for me, I feel like for all of the problems with social media, the community building and information exchange aspects of it are why I keep coming back to it. Okay, I had to pause for a second. George came out to start something in the air fryer, which is behind me, so there might be a little air fryer noise. In the summer, I cook outdoors as much as possible. We have a little propane tank and a little burner out here. We cook on a wok or cast iron skillet. And then I have this bench behind this butcher block, which is also, which is from my great grandma. We have a little bench back here, and I run my rice cooker and my Instant Pot, my slow cooker, and the air fryer out here in the summer to keep the house cooler, so I don't have to run the air conditioning and we don't have to swelter. So Effie asked me, was there a project that I've done that I thought was going to be, like daunting or take more time and be more difficult than I thought? That's a good question. There's lots of garden ones I could answer for that, and maybe I will in another video. But in terms of homemaking ones, I would say learning to sew more complex garments is a big one. The first time I bought more complicated patterns where I was making something like a blouse or I was making a dress for one of my daughters, and it seemed a little daunting at the beginning, and it seemed like there were tons of seams and raw edges that had to be turned and finished by hand. Those things for me don't take as long as I think because I carry them with me. I enjoy sewing a lot and I get them done on the go. I try and make my projects portable, and that means I'm working on it in time that would otherwise be wasted time, and so I finish more quickly than I think. I'll also say that for me, projects that I engage in tend to be ones that I enjoy and gravitate toward. So I'm really good at putting off things that I don't want to do and I know will take a long time and be arduous, like we need to redo our whole basement bathroom. This mosquito bit me on the forehead earlier while George was out here, and now I have a big mosquito bite and it's itching, so sorry. And one here too. Oh, it's getting mosquito-y. So we haven't redone that bathroom because I'm not super thrilled with it. I will say that tiling behind our wood stove is one that was quicker than I thought. A little tricky to maneuver if you are ever going to tile behind your wood stove. I highly recommend tiling first and then installing the wood stove instead of putting in the wood stove and then a year and a half later deciding to tile around it when there's like a 13-inch clearance. Difficult to tile and grout in particular. But it went much quicker than I thought. Thank you for that question, Effie. So the last question I'll take tonight, because the mosquitoes are getting terrible, is what do I do to recenter myself when things are really hectic and life is kind of progressing at that really frenetic pace? I'll let George get his food real quick. I don't know if I have a great answer for that. That is also something that I struggle with. I've talked in some of my older videos about how I have a persistent problem with overproductivity, and a lot of that stems from my childhood and also kind of religious baggage that I have of needing to be productive, to have a sense of worth, and to feel like people won't want me around or value or appreciate me unless I'm constantly grinding and like producing something or taking care of something in a way that's helpful for other people. And so it's really hard to kind of recenter and chill out and like focus on my own needs and kind of get to a place where there's stillness and quiet. I have a very hard time meditating. There is a line from a song in the new Fall Out Boy album. Yes, I found a way to sneak Fall Out Boy into a video because they are my favorite band, despite the fact that I'm not an emo girl. In their new song, What a Time to Be Alive, there's this line that keeps, I find it hilarious and really relevant. It says, "They say I should try meditation, but I don't want to be with my own thoughts." that feels really true, because not that I am ashamed of my thoughts, or like, we've all done things we regret, but it's more that I have a hard time quieting my thoughts, and I have a hard time being still and not constantly thinking of the next task that needs to get done. So when I sit and try and center myself, or I go for a walk, I find that I have a hard time not just wanting to divert myself onto the next task. When I go for walks or go for a run, I typically listen to a podcast or a book, and that's a way to kind of get some space. I'm in the outdoors, I'm moving my body, and I'm, connecting with the sensations in my body, but I'm also having a way for my brain to engage with something that is enjoyable for me. So that's one really important way for me. I try and go for a walk every single day. I used to run a lot more. I used to skate all the time. But as I get older, my knees can't really handle the running quite so much. The second thing I do is I have handwork all the time. And for me, knitting or sewing or spinning is something that's very repetitive and very rhythmic that I can do with my hands. And that is a very centering activity. I'm not neurodivergent, I don't need to stim, but I think it is sort of like that. It's a sort of similar physiological need to engage in a behavior that is repetitive, because that's very soothing. And so that is something that I find that I do a lot. I would say that when my friend Kathy taught me how to knit when I was 18, it was transformational. I used to doodle a lot before that. But just this motion of knitting, it's very rhythmic. I don't have to watch what I'm doing. It's something I do with my hands, and my body is activated and working on something in a way that is a physical meditation, even if my head can't engage in a meditation, because it's hard for me to quiet my thoughts. So thank you all for all of your questions. I appreciate all of the folks who weighed in, and I was expecting like 3 questions instead of, dozens. So thank you very much for that. And maybe I'll do an AMA for gardening and more permaculture focused subject matter in the coming weeks. I think that might be helpful, because I really want to know what y'all want me to talk about. I'm still always floored that you care that I'm talking about anything. Also, as I go here, please don't forget to check out down below ways that you can support this channel. I will also link to answers to a question about what kinds of cookbooks I like. So I'm going to link to ones that I know and use and love. Some of the authors may be problematic, and I may have been using and enjoying the recipes long before I learned about the issues that they have. So I will still link to them. So just because I am linking to a particular cookbook, it doesn't necessarily mean I endorse the author themselves and their behaviors, but they are just cookbooks that I use frequently. And some of them I've used since I was a child and was first learning how to cook. So check that out down below. And thank you all for watching Hausfrau Friday. I hope that you have a lovely summer evening that is free of mosquitoes, just in time for George's things to come out of the air fryer, and I'll be back real soon. Thanks.